you just get the result. And then if it's great, you duplicate it. And if it doesn't, right?
You just see.
Yeah, it's like giving people permission
Yes.
to take a breath.
They think that the crushing it every day thing is a part of the useful persona that I need in order to win on that field.
Mm-hmm.
And my answer is, I don't know that's true.
There's such a important factor to have that.
Yeah.
But then there can become a toxic factor to it as well. If you really care about your craft and you want to become mastery level at anything that you're doing, you're reviewing it because you care, not because you're trying to be some version of yourself that you're not.
That's right.
So I think that that's really important. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us on the Candy Valentino Show. I'm so glad that you are tuning in to spend this time with me today. I have such a treat, and this isn't just a treat for you, honestly, it's a treat for me as we get to talk to someone who has been in his field prior to it becoming an industry. And we're going to talk all about it as we have the honor and joy to really sit down today and talk with Todd Herman. Thanks so much for being here.
Candy Valentino, the lady who has a chihuahua that I just found out.
Exactly. Thanks so much for coming in and flying in to be with us today.
I'm excited for this. Yeah.
It's so often that we meet people that, are some sort of a coach, but they're this coaching industry. They've been maybe for a year or two and they're trying to help people. And literally I said, you're like the OG. You've been doing this before it was an industry. Yeah.
I'm not going to take a moniker of an OG. However, because I think that there's a lot of people on the Mount Rushmore of my world. But yes, I started in 1997 before coaching was an industry, before there was federations and associations and things like this. Yeah. So it's like anything. And you know this, like when you're kind of one of the first ones in a space, it's pushing a very big boulder up a hill. But luckily, and this is kind of some of the stuff we might talk about, I was just interested in it. I loved the chance I had to work with teenagers on their mental game. That's where I kind of started, was with teen kids and building a mental game and peak performance coaching business.
Yeah. So I want to dial back because we're going to get into obviously best-selling book and working with the Black Mamba and all of these things that you've done, which is incredible. But let's pull back into what got you into this to begin with, because most people don't wake up 27 years ago and say, I want to help people, help teenagers on their game.
I like to call myself an accidental entrepreneur. I didn't explicitly go out with this big vision and building some sort of big coaching or training business or something. I was a college football player and I was a nationally ranked badminton player as well. So football, badminton, they always go together, right? But I'm not physically gifted. I'm not 6'4" and 245 pounds of solid muscle. And I had two older brothers growing up on our farm and ranch where I grew up in Alberta, Canada. And so I developed some mental toughness skills having some older brothers. And it became part of my superpower as an athlete then. And because again, I was a bit scrawny and I could never put on like muscle mass as I was in high school, but I never let that be my limiter in my performance on that field. And so when I got done playing college football, I volunteered at a high school and I started talking to the kids more about like game preparation and mental game stuff and, setting better goals for themselves, all the things that were kind of helping me. And they started getting some great results, not just on the field, but specifically in the classroom as well. This one kid went from being a 29% average in school, which was pretty much his entire life. He was a grade 11 student, to being on the honor roll within 6 months. Because I was teaching them kind of like how the mind works and like we can shape and shift ourselves very easily because of the way that we're structured. We're not trees. An acorn will always become an oak tree, but humans can shape and shift. And so they started getting these results and parents started asking me if I could mentor their kids.
The work that you do with athletes and how you've created these personas, this alter ego and this identity. Because as somebody myself, like I was in the business world 20 plus years, had a certain identity in a certain community, moved across the country. Like there's a lot of people that struggle with that. They might be doing something and then they want to shift or change. And it's like, how do I change the identity of who I am?
Yeah.
And even know who you are in like a second act or another business or something like that. Is there a process that if someone's watching right now and they're like, wow, that's kind of like me. I know that we have a lot of those people in our viewer audience, that you can help them as far as how do you start to develop that? What are some of the first steps?
Well, as a matter of fact, Candy, there is a process. I just wanted to do my radio voice.
And it's in your book.
And by the way, folks, it's in the alter ego effect, breaking the fourth wall. Yeah, so let's go first to like where I kind of index towards. So I'm building this mental game and performance company. And then in the early 2000s, I started to see that one of the fastest ways I could help clients get results was when I didn't just try to give them new routines and new methods and teach them something that they would then try and, like a Lego block, like block on or latch on to kind of who they are right now. It was easier if I went right to the core of this particular field that we're trying to go and win on. Could be the ice rink, could be the football field, could be the tennis court. Like when we look at that field, and then I say, and there's an art to what I'm doing right now in that when I'm trying to get someone to build a new identity for themselves, I want to help create opportunities to disassociate in some way. So what I mean is we're just looking at this thing and it's the field of play over here. So for this field, and then when we look at what does that field need from you to go and win on it? Like who's the person that we need to build to go and win on that? Okay, which is the identity of someone. So that was what I was discovering was like, oh, when I worked with people at the identity level and we were custom building an identity to win on that particular field with that role that they had, wide receiver, quarterback, tennis player, swimmer going into the pool, whatever, the person was able to like kind of more thoughtfully think about, oh yeah, like there's two sides of me. There's the one that walks around in kind of regular everyday life, and then there's the one who goes out there and competes. And so that's what I need. I'm like, yeah, because I need them to realize that there's many selves that we have. And so that's what we do. We build out that identity, and that became very successful. So I started to become known as the fixer or the quick hit guy. I could come in very rapidly. And if someone was playing in the US Open at Flushing Meadows on Saturday, but they had been struggling through the ATP tour over the last 3 months, and it was a Wednesday, I'd get a call and say, hey, can you come out and talk? And because I'm working with you at the identity level and all of our habits, behaviors, beliefs, attitudes are stacked on top of our identity, because human beings will always act through whatever they associate themselves with. Your identity shapes your reality. So when I change the identity of the person who's going out there to perform and compete, their performance can change really rapidly. So then apart through that process, I'm now starting to work with more and more elite athletes and more professionals or Olympians. And the best of the best would talk about having a persona, a character, an alter ego, secret identity that they would use as their source of inspiration for how they want to show up out there. And for me, I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. I did the exact same thing when I played football. I had Geronimo. Geronimo was a composite of Walter Payton and Ronnie Lott, two of my heroes in professional football, and then a tribe of 5 Native American warriors, where I grew up in Alberta, Canada, rich with Native American history. And I used to ride around on my horse Crackerjack looking for fire rings to see if I could find some old artifacts like arrowheads or something like that on our big farm and ranch. I would always be like, oh, that's really cool, Candy. You have an alter ego, like, or you have a persona. I did the same thing. So it was really just, I wasn't doing anything more than just in our coaching conversation, just having a convo about that. Didn't even clue in yet until an athlete said to me their persona. And then I was like, 36 other conversations, just like dominoes toppled together finally. And I'm like, wait, this is a thing. And so I started interviewing all my clients, and I started developing the method that I talk about in the book, the alter ego method, which is really about helping you custom build an identity that's going to help you win on that field. So that
whatever that field may be,
whatever
business,
it is,
investing.
going back to your point about like people are trying to make a shift. That's one of the biggest reasons why people will leverage an alter ego, is because you spent 20 years creating this particular sense of self in your corporate career. And because you flex that identity muscle every day, we make the mistake of thinking, oh, that's me. But no, that's the habit of how you show up as you. And so, and that was a very useful identity for you to help you get whatever results you were getting in that corporate career, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was useful. And so when we actually think about things in life that we do every day, it's useful to help us achieve some sort of goal. Now someone goes, wait a second, Todd, I'm not achieving some of my goals right now. And I'm like, no, but the goal that the way that the results that you're currently getting, because our brains are goal seeking, they're teleological, they're constantly moving towards some sort of target. Even if you don't have a target right now, your mind is inventing one.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that you show up right now is a very useful version of you to hit this current results that you got.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's just change that. So that identity that you had was useful to help you in that career.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's like, okay, wait, let's just stop. Because remember, we can shift and change. We're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
We have the capacity to, transform ourselves. So now in this new career that you have, Candy, in this domain, what's that new version of you that we can bring? And we can borrow some of the qualities from this, corporate Candy.
Mm-hmm.
And so now this new version of you, how do you want to show up there? What didn't you like about some of the ways that you could have felt trapped in that corporate world? Like, did you feel, you know what, I've got way more creative energy.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't feel as creative. So in this new, I want to make sure that I'm more creative. I'm like, great. So creativity is one of the core attributes and traits of this new version of you. Anything else? And we list off some of these traits and abilities, attributes, and I talk about all this stuff in the book. And then I go, great. Next step is, because now we're kind of building up what I call like the source code. So when I'm showing up on that field of play out there, I want to be creative. I want to be resilient. I want to be strong. I want to be more playful. I want to have more fun. I want to be more decisive or more confident. 4, 5, 7, whatever those traits are. And then it's like, is there anyone or anything that already kind of exhibits some of those traits and behaviors for you? And the reason that's important is when you think about how our brain is, a lot of it is dedicated to the visual cortex.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're trying to move towards a goal, and this could be the goal of what I'm trying to become, and I don't have a clear vision or picture in my mind of what that is, it's hard to stay either consistent with it or engaged with it or excited about like, oh, this is what I can become. I can become more like insert Oprah,
Mm-hmm.
insert Martin Luther King, or insert Mr. Rogers, because he's one of my source codes of inspiration for who I want to be as a dad.
Yeah.
Okay. Because he's the exact opposite as the challenger type that I bring to the coaching or the training that I work with my clients on.
Mm-hmm.
Because I need to, because I work with some pretty large egos that are coming to me and I have to challenge them, just like my mentor Harvey showed me when he was working with people. So he was a great model
Mm-hmm.
in my mind for how I wanted to move as a coach through my career. So now I have this picture in my mind with this source of inspiration of who I want to be more like. And now my mind has a good picture. And Epictetus, the great philosopher in before 0 BC, said, adopting the characteristics and manners of someone else, there's nothing false in this. We all need a point of reference in order for us to become more of who we are.
Mm.
There's nothing fake about, and it's so true. Like, because I'm not going to be a perfect model of Harvey. There's still other parts of me.
Sure.
But he's a very useful point of reference for me to become a coach. Or Mr. Rogers, like how he would always get down on one knee and get down on the eye level of the kids, and just even the way he held his hands. And it was a very passive stance, which most parents, they come home and they say things like, Todd, I have a hard time turning it off. I was a hard charger. I was a high achiever all day. Or, like I was managing people, and then I come home and I do the exact same thing. And I'm like, yeah, because you haven't custom built the identity for who's going to be in that home. Let's build that identity. So that's some of the work that I did at Fort Bragg with the United States military, was working with Army, like Rangers and Green Berets, and you guys have a uniform that carries with it 150 or 200 years of story and meaning around it. And then there's a credo and a motto of what it means to be a Green Beret or an Army Ranger or insert name of whatever group. And then you put on that uniform. And there's a term I talk about in the book called enclothed cognition. And enclothed cognition is that we as human beings add story and meaning to the world around us, including articles of clothing or even artifacts. Lipstick can be one.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is when you put on that article of clothing, Batman's cape or Mr. Rogers' sweater,
Mm-hmm.
or one that looks like it, or a white doctor's coat, you will enclose your mind in the cognitive traits and abilities of whatever story you have about that thing. So you will naturally become more detailed, methodical, careful, and smart if you put on a white doctor's coat. And that's kind of the meaning you have around wearing a doctor's coat.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't train yourself on being more detailed, methodical, careful, or smart. You will just naturally do it. That's some of the great mystery of the mind.
Mm.
And that was where I always anchored my training companies around is I'm not here to posture with a bunch of bullshit ideas that have been passed around through personal development, self-help world from people who've never done the work.
Mm-hmm.
I am in the trenches every day. And I have been for 27 years, almost coming up on 20,000 hours of one-on-one coaching time. Not group coaching, not standing on stages, not training. And Candy, if you and I are having a private conversation about what's really going on and what's blocking you from getting out there and doing the thing that you want to do,
Mm-hmm.
or not performing to the level that you want, there's a lot of things that you're going to share in that trust that we have that's very different than if you're on a group Zoom call.
Yeah.
Or you're in a conference room and you're coming up to a mic.
Yep.
Now might have some people who might be vulnerable in that moment, but not everybody is going to tell you. And so I just kept on, look, why does this work so well? What's the science of why when I get my athletes and clients to wear a uniform or use a totem or an artifact, what's allowing that to unpack more of that? Mm-hmm. So then we're testing and I'm going back to science. What's going on over here? So enclosed cognition was one of those just fascinating little psychological triggers that we all have in us. So I'll say this, going back to what you were saying about how can someone who has the aspirations of being an entrepreneur right now, but isn't taking action, what if you started to create a specific uniform or you bought a specific uniform that's your entrepreneurial uniform that you put on to show up as that identity of someone who is taking action to realizing your dream or goal of owning your own thing. And the moment you find yourself not acting through that entrepreneurial self, you got to take it off. Now, I'm not saying strip down nude if it's an entire uniform, but if it's a pair of glasses, like I did. Mm-hmm. I was 21 when I started the Peak Athlete, and I looked like I was 12. This is where you're supposed to say, "Oh, you still look young, Todd."
You do still
Come on,
look young,
Candy.
Todd. Come on.
I'm fishing for a compliment. No, but I was super insecure about the fact that I looked so young, and I also had these rules in my head that anyone who goes up and talks about the mental game, you have to have at least 3 best-selling books. That was literally not one, 3. 3. Because some people that I followed had like 3 books.
Yeah.
And then, I also need letters behind my name. I need to have like 2 PhDs or like just Todd Herman with a bunch of letters behind it, which wasn't true. Mm-hmm. And then it would get in the way of me actually marketing this little fledgling practice.
So some of the beliefs you have to drop. Some of the things that you think you need for the identity, you have to drop, is what I'm hearing. Like the letters, the best-selling books, all of that. But not having an identity is going to keep you stuck in what you are and what you're already doing. And it's interesting you said 21. I was 19 when I started my first business.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that I did exactly what you're talking about. I wore a black suit, pantsuit, blacker than this, every single day of my life for 15 years.
Yeah.
Because I was 19 and I was hiring people that were twice my age. So as a female, there wasn't much I could do facial hair or anything. Like guys can make themselves older. So I wore a black suit and I carried a briefcase instead of a purse every single day.
Okay, I'm going to go back to a funny story where people are going to judge me on it from when I was in elementary. But I'll finish this one off. And so I was insecure, but all of the smartest kids I grew up around in my small little farming community of Schuler, Alberta, shout out Schuler. Literally, there's only 82 people who live there. So like,
they all saw it.
They all are going to see this. they were all had glasses.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Volk, James Hagel, brilliant, smart guys. And so I had this association that people who had glasses were just smart.
Mm-hmm.
So I went out and I bought a pair of non-prescription glasses. Now, I didn't go out, Candy, to invent a new Todd, because the version of me that was the coach, I didn't really have a lot of issues around me being the coach.
Mm-hmm.
Because the one thing that can get you past some of maybe your own lack of experience is whether or not you actually care about your clients.
Mm.
And I out-cared many other people who had 25 years experience because I loved working with teenagers and I was so good at building rapport with them. And that creates that space where now they have trust and I can get to like helping them.
Yeah.
Okay. So I went out and I bought a pair of non-prescription glasses and I used them to build the part of me in my business that I needed, which was the sales and marketing Todd.
Mm-hmm.
And I called him Super Richard.
Okay.
And I know that this part resonates with a lot of people because many people can be carrying around stories of where they come from or who they are. People can call them traumas, whatever, that that are hurtful and hold you back. And I did. And whether it was self-worth issues or a lack of belief that I could even see this thing grow bigger than me just working with some young kids one-on-one. And Super Richard was hired to be the advocate for Todd's stuff. And I say it that way because he really was. He was hired to specifically carry the weight of putting myself out there. And Super Richard, he cared about getting Todd's vision and goal of, making an impact with young teenagers out there. Because Super Richard recognized that Todd cared, but he had a hard time getting on calls and putting himself out there and possibly getting rejected. So when I put on those glasses, I was adopting the characteristics and traits of three of my heroes. Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Power of Myth, The Hero's Journey, all these amazing things. I saw him in a Bill Moyers PBS special when I was 13 and just thought this guy's the most articulate person I've ever seen. And I wasn't articulate, so I needed that trait. And then Superman, decisive, man of action. I was the man of inaction, right? Went to bed, put my head on the pillow every night, lots of ideas as to how I was going to show up tomorrow. And then I'd end my day not doing those things that needed to happen to move my business forward. And so I wanted to be a man of action. And then finally, Benjamin Franklin. I've read his biography, and by that time I'd read it probably 7 times. But I thought, man, this human being reinvented himself and had 7 incredible careers in one lifetime. Like the confidence to be able to do that is so inspiring. So I wanted to be more confident. And those were the ways that when I put on those glasses, I was Super Richard. No, I didn't get on calls and say, hey, this is Super Richard calling for. No, I was still Todd. Like that's the name I would introduce that way. But what I was acting through was Super Richard, adopting the mannerisms and traits and characteristics of other people so that I could realize something about myself. And then 6 months later, I made I booked 2 speaking gigs for myself. And I looked down at my desk and I felt so good about like what I just done. And my glasses were sitting on my desk. I had finally become that. I'd finally gotten past that issue of being concerned about what other people were thinking about me, or, not describing myself as being good at sales or communication or marketing or whatever. And I'd finally become that. And Cary Grant, the great Hollywood golden era actor, he talks about this in an interview at the end of his career. And he came from Bristol, England, single mom, and came from nothing. He wanted to make something of his life, and he wanted to go do it in Hollywood. So he changed his name to Cary Grant, and he did struggle with like depression throughout his life, but he mastered it. And he said at the end of his career in an interview, I pretended to be somebody I wanted to be until I finally became that person, or he became me. But at some point, we met. And that's literally what I'm constantly doing with this method with people, is using identity as a useful way to help you navigate difficult things in life, helping you achieve aspirations, helping you move past some sort of things that are holding you back, what perceptions you have about what you think you're capable of, or people from my town can't do it, or people from, my small village can't do this kind of thing. And, well, that's going to trap this current identity. But there's another version of you that we can create that can go out and win. Who's that? What's their source of inspiration? What does that look like? And let's go do it.
It's so fascinating, because really it all comes down to, once you have the identity, the behavior and the habits eventually become who you are. So it becomes that identity, becomes your reality through doing the reps, showing up as that person over and over and over again.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Which is no different than how you and I are showing up right now. Right? So like, I always look at I call it looking at the game film. Everything I do is a sports performance approach. Like, I have a entrepreneurial training company called 90 Day Year, and it takes the same sports performance principles that we use with athletes, and I bring it into the business world, and we install it inside of businesses as the performance system or operating system for how your business grows. So it keeps you at peak performance level, keeps you out of burnout and overwhelm, and keeps you in a state of flow, which is basically the stuff that I've been working on for 27 years with people. So going back to exactly what you said, it's this, we are helping people constantly evolve and kind of just see that, what I was going to say was, doing the reps, even this, I will take a look at my game film from this week. I rewatch at least 3 hours of my coaching calls, and I don't do only one-on-one coaching, by the way. Like, I don't, but I still keep hours in my week available to that, because it keeps me close to the field of play, right? Like, what's actually happening out there? What are people struggling with? That's why I can see some of these social traps, cultural traps that people are engaged in that they don't even realize is one of those strings that's blocking them from moving forward. So concerned about what someone's going to say about them on Twitter. Like, it's not a real human. I don't really care if someone doesn't like my message this week. Okay. But I can go back to my message and also, can I say it better? That's me looking at the game film. I just came off the field. Now let's look back.
Can I communicate it better?
Can I optimize? Can I automate? Can I improve it? So I'll look at my game film, even from our interview. Hey, what can I do different? Could I said something different? And so when we look at our own identity the same way, hey, is the guy that's showing up on these interviews, is there anything we can do to like make him be more fun, or like whatever the desire is?
Right. If you really care about your craft and you want to become mastery level at anything that you're doing, you're reviewing it because you care, not because you're trying to be some version of yourself that you're not.
That's right.
So I think that that's really important.
So I just going back to that, I think if people evaluate, hey, am I goal setting to something or through something? Because when we're goal setting through something, there's actually a lot more meaning and purpose to it.
It's so fascinating. I didn't realize this myself, but when I started my first company in 19, I said, and I don't know where I got this from. I don't know if it was from just reading books, because I grew up super poor and, my dad was a mechanic. And so I don't know where this came from, but somehow I heard something along the way that a very small percentage of female-owned businesses ever break $1 million, and a very, very small subset of those ever get valued enough to be exited.
Yeah.
And so whatever I heard, I was like, that's what I want to do. I'm 19 years old. I want to build a business that I can sell by the time I turn 40. Now, when I think back about it, I never thought this until you mentioned this. That was actually a through goal. It wasn't start a business. It wasn't hire somebody. It wasn't build another location. It was like, I really laid out 20 years of what the goal was without realizing it. I wasn't smart enough to realize that. It was by accident. But when I look at goals that I have now, because to me, that was a big checkbox. I did that twice. That was a big check. I look at goals now, it was to write a best-selling book. And I don't know if we'll actually leave this in, but just sharing vulnerably, when I found out that I was number 3 on Wall Street Journal bestseller, I was in the most amazing resort in Mexico that I love to go to. It was Thanksgiving, because it takes like a week for Wall Street to report. We knew Atomic Habits was at number 1, so there's no way it was going above number 1. We anticipated we'd be number 2, but I really wasn't concerned. I just thought if we could hit the list as a first-time author, I was excited. That night, I don't even remember this. Anthony actually told me. That night, I was in the room crying. And I remember not crying that I didn't do something. I was crying because I couldn't, I felt that I thought there'd be a different feeling. And I'm not a big emotional person. So he remembers those moments really well. And he was like, you just realized you wrote a book, you launched a book, you got on the list, and you're in tears. And I remember beating myself up because I was like, I know it's crazy, right? So then it's like, I know logically that this is a crazy reaction to setting a goal, accomplishing a goal, and then now you're somehow not fulfilled by it. And I've honestly had that feeling probably 2 or 3 additional times in these last couple years since coming out of my exit and doing everything, that checking the box, moving to Arizona, getting the big house, doing all this stuff. And then now it's like, you get the big invite on the stage and it's like, you know, like, oh, that's great. But then once you do it, it doesn't, there's like something missing. I don't know if there's like a formula or something that you take people through that when they are achieving the levels of what they want and there's something missing there. Is it the way that they're viewing it, or does it go back to that through line? Yeah, there's
a perception that you have with regards to this achievement that is limiting it impacting you at a deeper level. So you had a experience and a milestone that it got onto a list, and it's there. It's in black and white of number 3, right? But there's another side to this, Candy. You exiting. So these are 2 very, very simple sentences in your bio. But when you internalize them differently, they're actually stepping stones for a platform to speak and connect to other people to help bring them up to this same type of experience that you've had. The 2 sentences are, Candy Valentino has exited, built, scaled, and sold 2 different ventures. She's also written a Wall Street Journal best-selling book, okay? Those are assets for you. And so what would be great if going forward, so that you can kind of like own the emotional resonance of these assets that you've had, is that you think about them as simply story blocks for you to be taking out there to share with other people, not from a posturing standpoint or from an ego standpoint, but relating it back to how you grew up. Hey, I'm Candy Valentino. Yep. I'm up here in a nice pantsuit, perfectly coiffed hair, good makeup. You don't have to say all these things. But I want to take you back to the 8-year-old Candy Valentino that grew up with a mechanic dad who worked hard. I'll never forget, he always had grease underneath his nails, right? And you bring people back to extremely relatable experiences. And they start to see themselves in your story. And a part of that isn't so that they can also build, scale, and sell their own ventures, but it might actually cause someone to go, you know what? Like that girl who came from middle of nowhere or from not very much, or this guy who came from a single parent home or was an orphan or whatever the thing is, they go, maybe I'm going to actually go and pursue my art career. Like it's like, I think some people try to tell stories so that people can follow exactly in their footsteps instead of just inviting people into, here's the raw reality of how it looked, right? You know, Todd was an accidental entrepreneur. I was very explicit with the way that I went after entrepreneurship. There's different ways of doing this.
For sure.
But you know, just here's kind of how it happened. A lot of people stand up here and say, oh, I had it all figured out. Like I did this right and this right. Here's the 17 misfires I had through my career. Here's the $4.6 million that I lost in 3 different deals. Let me tell you a quick story. There's a wonderful researcher out of the University of Minnesota who brought a bunch of young school children, 6 to 8, into a room. And there was a puzzle box set up with a bunch of padlocks on it. Okay, and there was a set of keys to unlock all the padlocks. Problem was, none of the keys worked in any of the padlocks. And she was setting up an experiment to test resiliency and grit. So each kid, they get their keys and they're trying to work away at this padlocks and get it unlocked, this puzzle. And they're tracking all the data. Then, new set of kids individually gets brought in and they roll in a rack of Batman costumes and Dora the Explorer costumes, okay? Hey, pick your favorite costume, put it on, hand them the keys, get after it. Same keys, don't work, same puzzle box, doesn't work. And they tracked the results. Well, what were the results? The kids that were just sitting there in their own plain clothes would say things like, oh, I'm not good at puzzles. This is too hard. I'm going to quit. This is difficult. But the kids that were wearing the costumes would say things like, Batman always finds a way, so I'm going to find a way. Dora always figures it out, so I'm going to figure it out. Batman never quits, so I'm not going to quit. Okay. They weren't expecting to track the vocalized self-talk of the kids. So I asked people, were those kids that were wearing the Batman and Dora the Explorer costumes being inauthentic? Were they? No.
No, it just pulled something different out of them.
Pulled something different out of them. Why? Because the judgment wasn't on this core soft human being that's Jenny or little Timmy. The judgment was on Batman. The judgment was on Dora. It created this shield for them to protect this soft inner core that allowed them to bring their characteristics and traits and abilities out onto that, or to stick something out longer. That's what Super Richard did. It's a great question that you ask, Candy, around how many cells we have. We have many sides. Like there's the son, there's the brother, right? And if you're trying to be everything to everyone, it's going to be very difficult for you to achieve some of your own goals. This goes back to what my brother said to me. He's like, you're very good at helping other people with their goals, but you're not good at others or helping yourself. And how that would look is someone pings me and says, hey, Todd, can you help me with this? Yep, 100%. Yeah. What was underneath that though? It's because I didn't want that person to dislike me. Because if I said no, I equated no with they're not going to like me. And that's leading a fairly desperate life in your relationships. So if you're trying to master so many selves, like I talk about, I'm one of the only, I think, peak performance guys out there who talks about, you know what? You need to schedule average. It's okay to be average.
Yeah.
Like Wednesday is my average day. And what I know from the data that we have is that when someone schedules average, NBA player, schedules out of their 3 games this week, I tell them, one of these games, I want you to be average. After trying to unlock the gears in their head, they're like, what do you mean be average? I'm like, I don't want you to go in there with the expectation that you need to crush it tonight, okay? Let's just use it as an experiment, but I just want you to be average. Just take the break off of all those expectations that you have about how you need to show up. Just like relax a little bit more. Let's maybe just, there's being a little bit more playful in the locker room or whatever. Here's what the statistics say, because we track all this stuff since 1999 when I came up with this idea of be average. 86% of that person's performance that week, 86% of their games, their average game will be their best performance.
Their average game?
The game that they win with the attitude of being average will produce their best performance 86% of the time.
Wow, why is that?
Because they removed the expectation of having to live through this perfect self.
Wow. It sounds kind of freeing, honestly, to have an average day.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever given myself permission to do that.
But why
Nice.
Does it do that? Because it brings us into more of an attitude of playfulness. Playfulness is where the zone and flow state sits. Because it's the theta brainwave state. Kids between the ages of 6 months and 7 years of age operate in the theta brainwave. So there's beta, alpha, theta, and delta. Delta is like really deep rest and sleep. Beta is like the waking mind. You know, it's kind of like super active, paying attention to things. Alpha is more focused work. You know, like you're working on something and you're focused on it, not distracted as much. That's alpha. Theta is really the seat of the creative imagination. So kids are in theta. Why? Because we need them to be sponges at that age.
Yeah.
That age gap. So that they're learning a lot about life. Their critical thinking skills, the frontal lobe, isn't as active, judging everything that mom and dad are saying. We just need them to like, just listen. Like, just please don't put your hand in the fire.
Don't touch this. Right.
So they're observing and they're just sponges. They actually don't have what else? Kids at that age don't have an identity. You only develop a sense of me and my stuff and self at about 8, 9, 10, depending on the sex, female or male. And because, you know, girls will develop more quickly
Mhm.
mentally
Sure.
than boys. That's why on the playground they're like, why are those boys being so weird?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And it's because
Even when they're 20,
we're
we're like, why are those
still-
boys being so weird?
yeah, we're still lunatics. So, okay, so all that's fascinating then. Well, that's also when we're so easily playing mechanic 1 second, pretending to be dad.
Mhm.
And then we're playing dolls and then we're playing nurse with a friend and we're playing teacher. And then we're out in the front yard and we're pretending to be our favorite athlete, right? And none of those times are those kids feeling fake.
Right.
They're just glomming onto the characteristics and traits and trying to be more like Wayne Gretzky or Michael Jordan or
Mhm.
LeBron James or, Tom Brady, whoever it is. Because they're like, oh, I want to play like that. And we're not making them feel like crap because they're trying to act through an alter ego. So that theta brainwave state and that creative imagination is the seat of incredible performance, which is why this idea of being average helps to bring people to it, because expectation of having to crush it
Mm-hmm.
creates stress.
Yeah. So what do you do? I'm saying, yeah, because I agree. Like it does,
So you
it gets
come in,
heavy. What do you do on an average day?
When I got here, you were recording a bunch of your FAQs, the
Yes.
questions that people sent to you, right? And so, and I know you, like you have excellence. I mean, your entire branding is about excellence as well, right? But what if we show up and we're like, you know what? I'm not going to try and crush any of these questions like I normally would. I'm going to just, we're going to relax a little bit more with it, because that's the seat underneath it. It's like relaxing into it. And maybe what you find when you try to bring that energy through you is, oh, this feels a lot more like the side of me that I really like. A little more playful, a little more relaxed. I'm not trying to and I'm not judging, saying that that's what you're trying to do right now, but that's the experience of many people, that they think they need to be acting through. They think that the crushing it every day thing is a part of the useful persona that I need in order to win on that field.
Mm-hmm.
And my answer is, I don't know if that's true. Why don't we have some fun with this? And why don't we schedule an average day for you? Where you're not trying to hit the cold plunge at 5:30. And you're not trying to hit the bulletproof coffee at 5:46. And it's like, what if you just played with the accordion, not at compression level, but we just expand it out a little bit more and not try and force something.
And then I guess it's like, you just get the result. And then if it's great, you duplicate it. And if it doesn't, right?
You just see.
Yeah, see.
You're just the mad scientist in the lab figuring stuff out like we all are.
It's like giving people permission to take a breath.
Yeah.
And not have to, because there's so many high achievers and ultra performers and super successful business people that follow me and tune into the show. And I know that you need that to get to a certain level. Like Kobe wouldn't have been Kobe without being in the gym before everybody else and making sure that he was showing up. And so there's such a important factor to have that.
Yeah.
But then there can become a toxic factor to it as well.
There has to be, because nature tells us that something can't only be good. Right? So I think nature is the one of the best meta models out there as to grade whether or not something could be true or not. So if someone says, when you do this, you'll only get good results, that's not true.
Correct.
Okay. And I'll use alter egos as the example. Does everyone need an alter ego? No. But here's what I do know. If you're someone who's trying to pursue difficult things, you're going to bump up against the edge of your identity and what you can see yourself as. So what I know about successful people is they typically have the best tools that they can draw on when in a time of, whether it's crisis or challenge or opportunity. And that alter ego model is a great model for you to grab to help you move through the difficult or challenging part of shedding an identity to step into a new one for yourself. So does everyone need the alter ego? No, of course not. Still buy the book though.
We'll link all that below.
But in nature, water's a good example. Water isn't only good. When I'm floating in the middle of the ocean, last thing I want is another wave to crash on me, right? Hyperhidrosis, hypohidrosis. You can die by drinking too much water. And then you can die from not drinking any water.
Yeah.
Right? So toxic high achievement can be killing some area of your life, right? not having enough achievement can be killing an area of your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's this equilibrium, balance is such an overly used term, but it's like finding the right combination for you. That's why being that mad scientist in the lab with the way that, how do you work? So you get some great ideas from Candy, or you get some ideas from Todd, and then you put them to work for yourself. And through that process, you're going to start to develop your own sort of source code of success that works for you. And then eventually, hey, you might be standing on a stage one day saying, hey, this is kind of what I found for me. You don't need to use my exact recipe.
Right.
What was behind this was I was really a mad scientist in the lab. I was trying to just work on a lot of different things, and I figured out my kind of combination. I'm still figuring out my combination, right? And so hope you enjoyed the story, and, come and talk to me afterwards. Yeah,
because it's so true. Like the locks is such a great analogy with the kids. Because it's like sometimes too, in certain areas of your life, you may have you've figured out the combination. Like you're, okay, I know if I do this, I get this result. Exactly. This pays off in this way.
Exactly.
But then when either that goes away or changes in some way, or you try to take that same skill set into another area of your life, like I can't be in a relationship the same way that I am in business, because I'll just bulldoze whoever I'm in a relationship with, right? So I've had to learn that, like, to me, the cue is when I'm in the garage. When I come in the garage and I turn off the car, that's when work Candy, CEO Candy stops, and a much softer version of me is able to present. And until it becomes natural, like where it's natural is when I leave business and I'm going into the nonprofit world. For some reason, because of just visually, like you said, visual pictures, like the animals are there, you can see the impact. It's like, whoosh, you just soften into that person. But for the times that it doesn't happen naturally, I've just always had cues. And I, again, never really conceptually thought about that consciously. But I noticed that if I didn't do that, I would get a negative result. So what do we just do? Like, let's do the opposite of a negative result. I think Brendan Burchard always called them door frame triggers. And I think Tony always called it like changing your state. And I used to have, when I was younger, the opposite. When I would go into a meeting, my heart would be racing with all these people. And I would like have a move that I would make, and I would like I'm Candy Valentino. I would say I'm Candy effing Valentino. And then I would walk into the meeting, but like, that was like the version of me that I had to be in order to figure it out. So it's so funny that you say people might think that that's authentic, but I've actually done it in so many other versions just naturally as a survival mechanism in order to get through something.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's fascinating.
That's beautiful.
It's so fascinating. Please tell everyone, I want to be respectful of your time because I feel like I could talk to you all day. Where can everyone find the book, and how can they find out about the coaching that you offer? Because I think it's so immensely valuable. I do not recommend many people often because most people don't have the data. They haven't been doing the reps, and you've been doing this. You have a framework. So where
that's
can
how we
find
originally met.
That is how
through coaching opportunity. So toddherman.me is my home base on the internet, and that has links out to kind of like all the different tools and, businesses that I have going on that can help entrepreneurs or, athlete or alter ego world in the book, so toddherman.me is the best way to go.
Perfect.
But you can find the alter ego book in bookstores and on, Amazon and all the different online retailers as well. And then my favorite thing is when I do like a show like this is if people are on whatever social media platform, if you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening to this on Candy's podcast, screenshot your screen right now and then do a story or tag me and you, and just let me know like favorite takeaway, because I will 100% respond. And, DM, because all the different platforms that we play on, my team and I, we go in there, and I just love getting the, very real responses that we typically get from people about something that might have popped off in their head, or if you've used an alter ego in your past and you just didn't realize you were using it, kind of like what you're talking
what I just said. Yeah, right.
Let me know, because I've got other books that are coming out, and I love getting these stories because they're going to feed into another book. So
I love that. Yeah. So tag at Todd Herman.
At Todd_Herman.
And obviously the show, share it. We'll make sure that that's great information for everyone. And please go grab the book. Everyone that's watching, listening, go grab the book. I am not, I don't want to say fascinated by many people. I'm not, because I meet a lot of people.
You would.
But I love what you do. I think it's fascinating, and I love meeting somebody that's a true expert in their craft and in their field, and that's you. So thank you so much for coming on and spending this time with us today.
Appreciate it, Candy. Thank you so much.